I got my period in the 7th grade. I was at church. I remember that my mom was conducting the children's choir that day, as she often did, and I didn't want to bother her. I decided not to do anything about it until after the service, which those of you who get periods know was a risk. But it worked out okay for me. After my family got home, I told my mom in private. I remember feeling weird about it. I wasn't positive if it was exactly what I thought it was, but my mom confirmed. Yes, I had gotten my first period, and this was a special growing up moment. It's kind of exciting, she said, but I wasn't having it. To me, it felt like such a private thing and a little bit gross. I was not at all interested in going out for ice cream or doing anything to mark the occasion. Pretty much just didn't want to talk about it. From that day on, I had to learn to navigate having my period at a school where getting your period was very much a social taboo. I remember that there were 5 stalls in the girls' bathroom, and only 2 of them, the 2 on the farthest back, had the little garbage bins for disposing menstrual products. I was already an outcast at school, and having to use those stalls did not help. I tried to hide my condition by always using one of those 2 stalls, whether I was on my period or not, but it didn't work. Did you notice that Allison only uses the stall with the, period thing? Hey, Allison, are you on your period? I denied it. What? No, I always use that stall. I thought all the stalls had those bins. I don't think they believed me. I remember having to strategize about how to carry what I needed with me without anybody noticing. A purse would be a dead giveaway. So in the winter, I hid my pads in a little pocket of my coat, and I tried to go to the bathroom only at times when we were wearing coats. The spring and fall were harder. I hid my pads in a pencil case, but then I had to come up with a plausible reason to carry that to the bathroom with me. Whenever I was on my period, I generally felt gross. Not only was it physically uncomfortable, but I felt ashamed. My body was disgusting in the eyes of my peers, and I was terrified that I would be found out. In theory, we don't have purity laws in our culture or in our religion, but as just demonstrated, we do. How many of you are at least a little bit uncomfortable hearing so much discussion about your pastor getting her period? I get it, I'm a little uncomfortable. You might also find yourself justifying your discomfort. You might think to yourself, well, I don't think periods are bad or dirty. They're just not appropriate to talk about in a worship setting, up in the chancel. I don't want to be thinking about periods in a holy space during sacred time. If this thought crosses your mind, you're in good company. In Jesus' time, women on their periods could not enter the temple. There is a sense that sacredness and human bodily functions like these don't mix. Our gospel reading today is about the healing of women, a woman and a girl. There are 2 stories, and the first story halfway through is interrupted for us to hear the second story, and then we complete the first story. So it's a sandwich. There are many similarities in these 2 stories. First, I noticed the number 12. The author is sure to tell us that this little girl was 12 years old. Also the age that many young girls get their periods. And then the author tells us, actually before that, the author tells us that this woman who has been menstruating perpetually has been bleeding for 12 years, the length of the life of this little girl. So they are connected in this way. We also see 2 people fall at Jesus' feet desperate for his healing. First, we have Jairus, who is a leader in the synagogue. He probably had a decent amount of respect in the community. And for him to come out to this folk preacher who probably was considered a heretic by his peers and to bow down before him, subjugating himself and saying in his actions that you are more powerful than I, that was pretty intense. That was pretty radical. And that would have been something he only did in desperation, because this was very much against the societal expectations. Then we have the woman who is bleeding, the woman who is menstruating, and she does an act of actual civil disobedience and religious disobedience. She defies the law of their religion. Given that she is bleeding, as I said before, anyone on their period could not enter the temple, or anyone who is bleeding. But it was more than just that. They were also considered social outcasts. They couldn't be touched by others during that time. And in her case, this had been lasting for 12 years. It had been 12 years since she had been allowed to be touched or to touch. It had been 12 years since she had been allowed to be present on the Temple Mount. It had been 12 years since she was able to fully participate in her society. And she is also desperate, and she breaks the rules. She comes and she touches Jesus' cloak, even though she is impure, and touching him makes him impure. She risks that for the healing that she needs. When she is called out, she then, like Jairus, prostrates herself before Jesus, asking for his mercy, begging for his mercy, saying the truth. I did this. I went against the rules because I know that you are great and because I needed the healing that you provide. She's my hero. In both of these stories, the healing that Jesus provides reincorporates the person back into community. In the story of the menstruating woman, she is healed, and that healing now comes with it a social healing. She is now able to reconnect and participate in community. She's able to be touched again. She's able to participate in religious activities. She's able to do everything that other members of the community can do. In the case of Jairus' daughter, right away, Jesus says to her, eat, have some food with your family. Return to normal life. Return to community. Return to the table. This healing that Jesus provides is not just healing, it is about reincorporation into community. It's a healing of relationship. I said that this was a story about the healing of women. But what about the men in this story? Along with commentator Debbie Thomas, I wonder about Jairus, the father who loves his daughter so much that he does something kind of embarrassing to secure her healing. I imagine him rushing Jesus to his home. Come, I need you to come now to heal my daughter. And then Jairus, the one who is the ultimate religious insider, his quest to save his daughter is interrupted by the ultimate religious outsider, the woman who is menstruating. And Jesus stops. He stops in his tracks, and he turns around, and he makes a whole big scene about this. He makes everyone stop and listen. Listen to a woman. Listen to a woman who is known for perpetual bleeding, who is gross. Everyone must listen to a woman. And I can only imagine Jairus is sitting there being like, my daughter, come on. How can he have the patience for this? I also wonder if he squirmed a little when he found out that Jesus and this unclean woman had touched. And now Jesus is unclean, and now he's trying to get Jesus to come into his own house, to be with his precious 12-year-old daughter. I wonder if that makes him uncomfortable. I wonder how he might squirm. But he's really desperate, so he doesn't stop. He still lets Jesus come. At this point, he's being told, don't even bother because your daughter has died. But Jesus is like, no, I can still go. Don't declare death where I see life. And so Jesus goes and Jairus lets him. He lets this unclean man who has just touched this bleeding woman into his own home. And he lets Jesus touch his own precious 12-year-old daughter. He lets Jesus touch her. Jesus takes her by the hand, which is also something you're not supposed to do because dead bodies are also considered ritually impure and unclean. So this is the second time Jesus is touching and reaching across that ritually unclean boundary. He touches this daughter, and she is made well. Clearly, Jesus is entirely unconcerned about his own cleanliness or his own holiness. He does not feel at any kind of need to remain ritually pure. To him, that is not what it's about. For him, it's about community. It's about connection, which sometimes needs to happen through touch. It's about connection, which needs to happen through bodily functions like eating and drinking together. Jesus is there for connection, and he doesn't really care what your status is in the community. So I wonder if this changed anything for Jairus and the other men in the story. They saw these women being healed by Jesus, but even more importantly, I think, they saw these unclean women being touched by Jesus. I wonder if that shook up their sense of who is worthy. I wonder if that shook up their sense of who can be considered holy and clean. Jairus now has his daughter back, and she's 12 years old, maybe about to get her first period. I wonder if he looks at her differently now. I wonder if he sees her role in the community differently than he did before. I wonder if he sees his role in the community as an enforcer of these rules differently than he did before. As I mentioned in my children's message, we have a lot of rules in our community, written and unwritten. We have a lot of rules in our church, written and unwritten. Sometimes those rules separate us from one another and create taboos about what is acceptable, holy, or proper. I wonder how we might be healed by these stories today, how we might continue to be moved to let go of old rules, to let go of our sense of what is gross or disgusting or not acceptable or proper. Can we have the courage of Jesus and not worry about our own properness or our own appropriateness or even our own safety? Can we have the courage, like Jesus, to connect regardless? When I think back to my 7th grade self, I wish I could change the situation. I wish there had been a Jesus there to name what was happening, to embrace me. And I wish that had been done publicly. It would have been great for it to have been known in the quiet, in silence, that God loves me, and I did know that. I did know that in quiet and silence, and it would have been great to have had somebody in quiet, in private, remind me of that in those moments. But what's more important is for that to happen in public, because when it happens in public, that changes the view of everyone else. I wonder what would have happened if the most popular girl in school had said, "Oh, you're on your period? That's so cool. I just got mine last month." I wonder how that would have changed the culture. That's what we need. We need modern-day Jesuses who don't just say the right thing in private, but who say it in public so that others can hear and so that the community, the bystanders, are healed of these biases. Wherever you are in your life today, whether you relate to the parent whose child is dying, whether you relate to the woman who has been an outcast and considered unacceptable for so long, whether you relate to the one who is called to reach across those borders of social lines, I hope that you find inspiration in this story, and I hope that the love of Christ brings you peace.